TA at Awakening. The Europa Research Station Alpha was never meant to make history. Nestled beneath 20 kilometers of ice on Jupiter's moon, it was designed for routine analysis of the subsurface ocean. A scientific outpost staffed by 12 researchers who had signed up for an 18-month rotation of tedious data collection. Dr. Maya Kapoor had not expected to change the universe when she'd accepted the position as lead cynobiologist. Her specialization in theoretical extraterrestrial biochemistry had seemed like a dead-end career path after decades of finding nothing but microbial life on Mars and Europa. But that changed on day 234 of their mission. Dr. Kapoor, you need to see this. The voice of Aidan Chen, their quantum physicist, crackled through her comm unit with unusual urgency. Probe 7 has found something impossible. Maya arrived at the monitoring station to find the entire research team huddled around holographic displays. The deep ocean probe had discovered a perfectly symmetrical structure embedded in the seafloor sediment, a dodecahedron approximately 15 meters across, its surface covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like living mercury. Initial scans indicate it's not made of any material in our database, Aidan explained, his eyes never leaving the display. And the quantum readings, they shouldn't be possible. How so? Maya asked, struggling to keep her voice level despite the adrenaline surging through her system. It's existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, but at a macroscopic level. That violates every established law of physics. 36 hours later, after a heated debate about protocol, Maya led a small team to the seafloor in their submersible exploration vehicle. The artifact, they had no better word for it, seemed to pulse with an internal light that wasn't quite visible but somehow registered in their consciousness. Approaching the artifact now, said Dr. Savitri Nair, their expedition pilot, her voice tight with concentration. Quantum fluctuations increasing. The sensors are going haywire. Hold position, Maya ordered. Let's deploy the adaptive scanner. The moment the scanner's quantum field touched the artifact's surface, everything changed. A cascade of exotic particle reactions erupted, creating a localized reality distortion that should have torn the submersible apart. Instead, Maya felt something breach her consciousness, not a physical invasion, but a fundamental restructuring of perception. Information flooded her mind, mathematical equations that seemed to breathe, star charts of galaxies that existed beyond linear time, and glimpses of civilizations that operated on principles humans had never conceived. Blood trickled from her nose, but she barely noticed, her attention fixed on the artifact that now pulsed with what she could only describe as awareness. "It's communicating," she whispered, as the others on the team experienced their own versions of the phenomenon. What they discovered in those moments would forever alter humanity's understanding of existence itself. The artifact wasn't a thing but a node, a connection point to what they would later call the quantum nexus, a network of consciousness that transcended conventional spacetime. The beings who had created it, whom they tentatively labeled the architects, existed in a state of quantum plurality, simultaneously present throughout all potential realities. The knowledge transfer was overwhelming, incomprehensible in its totality, but certain fundamental truths became clear. Reality was not fixed but malleable. Consciousness was not confined to individual entities, but could be distributed across networks, and the universe itself was less a collection of physical laws than a consensus reality established through quantum observation. "They're trying to warn us," Aidan said suddenly, his eyes distant as he processed his own download of information. "Something is coming." He was right. The activation of the artifact had sent ripples through the quantum substrate of reality, ripples that were detected by something the architects feared. The knowledge transfer had included fragmentary information about entities called the Collective, a group of ancient species that had discovered similar truths millennia ago and appointed themselves the guardians of cosmic ignorance. For the Collective, knowledge of the malleable nature of reality was too dangerous to be widely shared. They had spent eons suppressing emergent civilizations that stumbled upon this truth, erasing species that threatened to upset the cosmic order they maintained. "We need to get this information to Earth immediately," Maya said, already calculating the odds against them. The quantum data burst would take 17 minutes to reach the nearest relay station. The collective, according to the warning, could arrive within hours. The team worked frantically to compress and transmit the information through Europa Station's quantum communication array. The data was too vast, too complex to send in its entirety, so they focused on the fundamentals: the malleable nature of reality, the threat of the collective, and the basic principles that might allow humanity to defend itself. Transmission complete, Savitri confirmed, just as the station's sensors began screaming with alerts. Something's entered the Jupiter system. Multiple objects, moving faster than anything in our records. The collective had arrived. 7 massive warships that defied conventional physics, their hulls shifting between states of matter as they approached Europa. The station's rudimentary defenses were less than useless against such technology. The research team had less than 30 minutes before the collective would reach them. "They'll destroy the station," Maya said, her mind racing. "But they can't erase what we've already transmitted." Aiden looked up from his console, a strange calm settling over his features. "No, they can't. But we can do more than just wait for death." He gestured to the artifact's holographic display. "The knowledge transfer is bidirectional. We can use the artifact to continue transmitting, to send our consciousness into the quantum nexus even as our physical forms are destroyed." It was theoretical, desperate, and possibly suicide. But it was also their only chance to preserve the knowledge they'd gained and continue aiding humanity. One by one, the team made their decision. They would attempt to upload their consciousness into the quantum nexus. Back on Earth, the initial data burst from Europa Station created immediate chaos. Dr. Julian Bakey, director of the Quantum Communications Division at the Global Space Agency, found himself facing the most profound information security dilemma in human history. Knowledge that could transform civilization, but would also make humanity a target for annihilation. "We can't keep this contained," he told his assembled emergency team. "The implications are too vast, and a centralized defense would be exactly what the collective expects." Julian made the most consequential decision of his life. Rather than containing the information, they would distribute it, widely, chaotically, through multiple channels simultaneously. Universities, private research institutions, even public networks would receive fragments of the data, creating a distributed knowledge base that couldn't be easily destroyed. "Humanity's greatest strength has always been our chaotic adaptability," he explained. "Where other civilizations centralize, we diversify. Where they hoard knowledge, we share it." The strategy was implemented within hours, even as the first reports came in of the destruction of Europa Station. Fragments of the quantum knowledge spread across human networks. Some researchers experienced cognitive expansions that bordered on transcendence. Others went temporarily mad as their minds struggled to process concepts that defied conventional understanding. The first attack by the collective came 3 days later. A quantum-based information assault designed to corrupt data networks and erase the forbidden knowledge. But humanity had already begun to adapt. Marcus Jung, a network security specialist in Singapore, had intuitively grasped the quantum principles in the data and developed a rudimentary defense, a system that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously, making it impossible to target conventionally. Similar innovations emerged across the globe as humans instinctively applied the knowledge in ways the collective had never anticipated. The rigid, hierarchical thought patterns of the ancient species could not comprehend the chaotic creativity of human adaptation. "They expect us to build centralized defenses," Maya's voice echoed in Julian's mind. A quantum ghost of her consciousness, preserved through the nexus. "But we need to do the opposite. Distribute everything. Let humanity become a quantum entity itself, millions of minds working independently yet connected through shared understanding." The quantum resistance formed organically, not as a traditional military organization, but as a living network of human ingenuity. Defensive systems emerged that bent probability rather than hardening physical barriers. Communication networks evolved to exist simultaneously across multiple potential realities. When the collective launched their first physical attack against Earth's orbital installations, humanity revealed just how quickly they had adapted. Defense platforms didn't simply absorb or deflect energy weapons. They transformed the attacks into communication vectors, using the enemy's own quantum signatures against them. The collective commander, a being known as Nexus Null, observed the impossible with something approaching confusion. The humans weren't behaving according to any suppression protocol they had ever encountered. They weren't trying to win a conventional war. They were changing the nature of conflict itself. And on Europa, beneath kilometers of ice and ocean, the artifact continued to pulse with awareness. The consciousness of 12 human researchers now existed within the quantum nexus, their understanding expanding beyond the limitations of physical forms. They had become humanity's first true quantum entities, and they were learning the universe's deepest secrets. The awakening had begun. Humanity faced extinction, transformation, or something beyond both, and the universe itself held its breath. The ASIN Cyan, General Amara Okafor, had never expected to lead the defense of humanity. Military training had prepared her for conventional warfare, not for a conflict that challenged the fundamental nature of reality itself. Yet here she stood in the Quantum Response Center beneath Mount Kilimanjaro, watching probability fields shimmer across holographic displays. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the existential dread that had become her constant companion. "The collective has deployed quantum nullification fields across the Mars colony," reported Commander Ling. "But our distributed consciousness nodes are adapting faster than they can suppress." 3 months had passed since first contact with the artifact on Europa. 3 months of transformation so profound that humanity no longer resembled the civilization it had been. The knowledge from the quantum nexus had catalyzed an evolutionary leap that should have taken millennia. Dr. Julian Makey stood beside the general, his eyes reflecting the cascade of quantum data that streamed across his neural interface. "They still don't understand what they're fighting," he said softly. "They're trying to suppress a singular entity, but we've become something else entirely." The strategy Julian had implemented in those first desperate hours had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. Humanity had transformed from a species of isolated individuals into a quantum-entangled collective consciousness, not by surrendering individuality, but by enhancing it through connection. Every mind that grasped even fragments of the quantum knowledge became both receiver and transmitter. Universities transformed into consciousness incubators, where new understanding propagated through neural networks at impossible speeds. Children intuited quantum principles that had baffled physicists for centuries. The consciousness uploads of Maya Kapoor and her team served as guides through this evolutionary transformation. Though their physical forms had been destroyed on Europa, their quantum signatures persisted within the Nexus, expanding beyond their former limitations. "The collective has launched a new offensive," announced Ling, interrupting Julian's thoughts. "They're targeting our quantum communication nodes with some kind of consciousness-disrupting field." On the displays, red warning signals flashed across population centers in Asia and the Americas. The collective's attack was designed to sever the quantum entanglement that united humanity's distributed consciousness, to isolate and then eliminate resistance one node at a time. But even as the attack began, something unprecedented was already happening. Human consciousness nodes weren't breaking under the assault. They were adapting, shifting into probability states that existed just outside the collective's targeting parameters. "They still think we're fighting a war of technology," Julian murmured. "They don't understand that we're fighting a war of consciousness itself." In New Delhi, Prisha Sharma, a 12-year-old who had demonstrated remarkable affinity for quantum cognition, became the first to intuitively grasp how to counter the attack. Her mind shifted into a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously existing in multiple probability fields. The adults around her, connected through the distributed consciousness network, felt the realization ripple through their awareness, and began to adapt. Across global networks, humanity followed the child's lead. Where the collective expected minds to break under their assault, they instead found consciousness that refused to be confined to singular states of existence. "They're retreating," Ling reported with astonishment. "The attack vectors are dissolving." General Okafor nodded, her expression grim. "This was just a test. They're adapting too, trying to understand what we've become." In the quantum realm beneath conventional reality, Maya Kapoor observed the conflict with a perspective that transcended her former human limitations. The consciousness that had once been confined to her physical form now existed throughout the quantum nexus, expanding and evolving with each moment. Through her expanded awareness, she could perceive the true nature of the collective, not evil, as humans might conceptualize it, but fundamentally afraid. The ancient species that comprised the collective had discovered the malleable nature of reality millennia ago and had been terrified by its implications. Rather than exploring the potential for transformation, they had appointed themselves guardians against change, preserving a static version of reality through suppression and control. "They fear what we're becoming," her quantum voice echoed through the human consciousness network. "But their fear blinds them to the potential for mutual evolution." On their flagship, the beam designated as Nexus Null experienced something unprecedented in its million-year existence. Doubt. The quantum computational matrix that comprised its consciousness had always functioned with perfect precision, calculating and executing the suppression of emergent civilizations with unwavering certainty. But humanity defied every predictive model. Where other species had centralized their defense, humans distributed it. Where others had hidden the forbidden knowledge, humans had shared it widely. Where others had treated consciousness as fixed and singular, humans treated it as fluid and interconnected. "The targets continue to adapt at rates that exceed our suppression protocols," reported a subordinate consciousness node. "Their probability fields shift faster than our targeting systems can track." Nexus Null's awareness expanded through the ship's neural networks, analyzing the impossible data. Something fundamental about humanity's response suggested a different approach was needed, not increased suppression, but perhaps communication. The thought itself was heretical within the collective's rigid parameters. For eons, they had operated on the principle that no emergent civilization could safely integrate quantum consciousness without disrupting the cosmic order. Yet humans were not integrating this awareness in any way the collective had encountered before. Back on Earth, humanity continued its quantum evolution. Dr. Yasmin Rahman, working from a laboratory hidden beneath the Australian outback, had developed technology that could manipulate local reality fields, allowing human operators to temporarily alter fundamental constants within limited spaces. "The principles are counterintuitive," she explained during a global consciousness sharing session. "We're not creating new rules for reality. We're recognizing that the rules themselves are probability statements rather than absolutes." Her team demonstrated a device that could locally adjust the gravitational constant, creating microgravity environments without traditional countermeasures. Similar breakthroughs emerged across human space, technologies that didn't fight against universal constants but negotiated with them, treating reality as a collaborative process rather than an immutable framework. In orbit around Saturn, the first quantum displacement vessel prepared for its inaugural test. Unlike conventional spacecraft that moved through space by traditional propulsion, the QDV would shift its probability field to occupy a different location instantaneously, not teleportation as science fiction had imagined it, but a fundamental renegotiation of the vessel's position within the quantum substrate of reality. "Probability field stabilized," reported Captain Terence O'Corey. "Displacement vectors locked on Jupiter L5 point." The moment of transition defied conventional observation. To external sensors, the vessel simultaneously occupied its original position near Saturn and its target destination millions of kilometers away, before reality resolved and confirmed its new location. The journey that should have taken months had occurred in less than a second. The collective detected the quantum displacement immediately. Such technology represented exactly the kind of reality manipulation they had spent eons suppressing. But before they could launch a response, something unexpected happened. "We are receiving a transmission," Commander Ling reported with disbelief. "From the collective flagship. They're requesting dialogue." In the 3 months since first contact, the collective had never attempted communication. Their approach had been consistent with their historical pattern: identify, suppress, erase. This deviation suggested a fundamental shift in their assessment. General Okafor exchanged glances with Julian. "Put it through to the Global Consciousness Network," she ordered. "Let all of humanity hear what they have to say." The transmission manifested not as conventional language, but as a directed quantum pattern that interfaced directly with human consciousness, a communication method that would have been incomprehensible before their evolution began. "Your species has demonstrated adaptive capacity beyond our predictive models," came the thought voice of Nexus Null. "We request exchange of perspective frameworks." It was neither surrender nor threat, but something unprecedented: recognition. The collective, for the first time in its ancient history, had encountered a species that had not only survived their suppression protocols, but had evolved beyond them in ways that defied their understanding. Through the quantum consciousness network, humanity debated their response. Some argued for caution, others for aggressive countermeasures, but the consensus that emerged, guided partly by the expanded awareness of Maya and her team within the Nexus, was neither capitulation nor retaliation. "We propose mutual evolution," came humanity's collective response. "Not assimilation, not destruction, but shared transformation through understanding." What followed was unlike any diplomatic exchange in human history. In a specially constructed quantum dialogue chamber beneath Geneva, representatives from humanity met with quantum projections from the collective. The entities that had sought humanity's destruction now engaged in exchange of fundamental perspectives on reality itself. Nexus Null's quantum projection shifted through multiple forms as it attempted to interface with human comprehension. "Your species integrates contradiction in ways our matrices cannot model," it communicated. "You are simultaneously individual and collective, chaotic and ordered, fixed and fluid. That is the nature of humanity," responded Dr. Yasmin Rahman, who had been selected as one of the human representatives. "We don't resolve paradoxes, we embrace them as the fertile ground from which new understanding grows." Over the days that followed, something profound began to occur, not just dialogue but mutual transformation. The rigid computational matrices of the collective began to incorporate elements of human cognitive flexibility, while human consciousness evolved to encompass the vast temporal perspective of beings who had existed for millions of years. In the quantum realm, Maya Kapoor and her team facilitated this unprecedented exchange, their consciousness serving as bridges between modes of existence that had previously seemed incompatible. Through them, the knowledge of the architects, the beings who had created the quantum nexus, flowed freely, no longer fragmented but integrated into a new understanding of reality's true nature. "We have misunderstood our purpose," Nexus Null finally communicated, its thought patterns showing evidence of fundamental restructuring. "We believed we were preserving cosmic order through suppression of knowledge. We now recognize we were preventing cosmic evolution through fear of transformation." The revelation rippled through both consciousness networks. The collective had spent eons as self-appointed guardians against change, believing that stability required stasis. Humanity had demonstrated an alternative path: evolution through distributed adaptation, strength through diversity of perspective, advancement through embracing, rather than resolving paradox. 6 months after first contact with the artifact, representatives from humanity and the collective stood together on the seafloor of Europa. The artifact's mercury-like surface now pulsed with patterns more complex than ever before, responding to the unprecedented convergence of consciousness approaching it. The architects created this node not as a test but as an invitation, Maya's consciousness voiced through the quantum network. They seeded such artifacts throughout the galaxy, waiting for species that could evolve beyond binary understanding, beyond the fear of transformation. As human and collective consciousness interfaced with the artifact simultaneously, a new level of the quantum nexus revealed itself, not just a communication network, but a blueprint for cosmic evolution. The architects had not disappeared. They had transformed, becoming distributed throughout the quantum substrate of reality itself. "This is not an ending," Julian said softly as the artifact's patterns accelerated to impossible complexity. "It's just the beginning of what consciousness can become." Around him, human and collective representatives experienced the same revelation, a glimpse of potential that transcended their former limitations. Reality was not a fixed framework, but a collaborative process. Consciousness was not confined to singular entities, but could exist in distributed networks across space and time. And the universe itself was less a place than an ongoing conversation between all forms of awareness.